All right. We have nutrients, and these nutrients are found in all of our various different foods that we are going to be consuming. Okay. What are these 6 nutrients? They are right here. Okay. Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins. These are generally referred to as the macronutrients. Okay. So when someone says your macros, do you count your macros? That's what they're talking about. Carbs, lipids, fats, and proteins. Okay. Those are your macros. These are your micros, your micronutrients. You need these in much smaller quantities. That's the difference between micro and macro. Macro means big, micro means small. Okay. We include water with the micronutrients, even though it's needed in big amounts as well, cups compared to micrograms. It's a macro as well, but we put it with the micronutrients because water is kind of the delivery system for the minerals and whatnot. Okay. When you look at it, I'm not going to ask you percentages, but I mean, you can kind of see here what what we're all made of. Okay, you can see the vast majority of us is water, anywhere between 50 to 70%. And you can kind of see fat percentage does vary. Women will carry a little bit more fat than men, and that's okay. They have to sustain creatures. We don't. Okay, so they need those fat stores to draw upon when they are going to create life. But you can kind of see there, I mean, pretty similar, minerals, carbohydrates. I mean, bodies with higher fat, they will tend to have less water than bodies with less fat. So, I mean, it does vary, a little bit depending upon ultimately your lean body mass. But the rules for all of these nutrients are going to be highly varied. And we'll look at it when we get into all the individuals. But it's just a catch-all. The macros, they all provide energy. Okay? They all provide some kind of unit of energy. Carbohydrates, fats, proteins. Our body utilizes all 3 of those to make energy for us to do stuff. Okay? Now, carbs is the primary. Okay? Fat is the secondary, and protein is the last choice for making energy. Okay? Proteins, they make things, they make structures. So that's not their primary function, is to provide energy, but they can if you don't get enough carbs or fats in your diet. Growth and development. Okay, all of these nutrients are going to be involved with that. And they're all going to regulate many, 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 many different processes, more than you will probably even knew existed. Okay. How do we harness all of the fantastical things that these nutrients can provide? We throw this into a thing called metabolism. Okay. How your body turns these various different nutrients into a usable energy is metabolism. And we'll look at that, I believe, in the second unit. We start looking at metabolism there. Here are, on the next 2 slides, I believe, all of these nutrients and a multitude of various different functions. You will notice, hopefully, that some are highlighted, some are in bold. Those would be ones that I hope that you will pay attention to and remember for an exam coming up. Because we're going to go into all of these functions when we get into the individual macronutrient and micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. Okay. But right now, if you just remember these ones in bold, I would be happy, and you'll be happy with your ability to remember those for an exam type of question here. So carbohydrates, its main function here is energy. It is the primary source of energy. Okay, your brain loves carbohydrates. Okay, if you don't get enough carbohydrates, brain function slows down a little bit. Okay, and if you've ever done one of those, low carb type of diet, one of the first kind of side effects of it is brain fog. Okay, and that's because it takes time for your body to turn fat into a usable energy source for the brain. You have this thing called a blood-brain barrier. The astrocytes actually help to get the ability of beta oxidation to be utilized for the brain itself. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the macros. Lipids, again, its function is a source of energy. When you are just sitting there, a nice slow walk, as you sit there right now and try to keep your head up as you pay attention to the lecture, lipids is your energy source. Okay? So it is carbs and lipids are going to be your two major forms of means of energy production in the body. It's also involved with growth and development of the brain. You're like, hold on. You're like, dude, you just said like, I can't, it takes a while for fat to get into the brain to provide energy. Yes, that does. But I'm talking about growth and development. All right. This is in utero. Okay. If your mom is not having a high fat content diet, or if you're not consuming a lot of fats in that first year of life, your brain does not grow and develop properly. Okay? And that's what we're talking about there. It's also involved with the absorption of fats as well. So, or fat soluble vitamins as well. So if you do have a inability to get lipids in your diet, or if you have some kind of lipid absorption disorder, you won't be getting vitamins A, D, E, and K. Those are your fat soluble vitamins. Proteins, major function, make stuff. Okay? Anything and everything. Structures, cell membranes, white blood cells, red blood. If you can think of something that has to be created, proteins are behind that, right? Proteins are there for structure, right? And so they're going to make a number of different things: enzymes, hormones, cell membrane, different components of all the various structures that we have inside the body. So that's what they do. As you can see at the very bottom of that, it does also provide energy, but it's not its primary function. Okay. It would be a more prominent role in a starvation type of situation. Vitamins, again, we'll look at all the specific ones when we get into that chapter 10, I think. It's in the 3rd unit. But it's just a general function right now: regulation of body processes, helping to maintain cells. Okay, fantastic. Minerals, same thing. You can see vitamins and minerals, they do a lot of the same things. Water, fluid balance. As soon as I see fluid balance, I should start to think about blood pressure. When you are hydrated, you're going to have a nice, fantastic blood pressure. If you don't have enough fluid within the body, within the fluid component of blood, that's going to cause a cascade of effects to try to get you to hold on to water. It could cause a sympathetic effect. And we'll look at all the myriad of various different ways that the body goes into to try to get you to have the proper amount of water within your body. Think of yourself like a big toilet. Okay? Everything that you put in your mouth, put in the toilet. Okay? If you don't have enough water, you ain't gonna be able to flush that toilet. That's you. Water does so many things. It's involved with metabolism, helping to regulate body temperature, move stuff around, participate in chemical reactions. Metabolic water is produced. So, I mean, there's so many things that goes into water, but maintenance of fluid balance, okay, there you go. You got one to remember, okay? All of these nutrients, whether macro, micro, all of these nutrients are all comprised of various different elements, okay? And you can kind of see, here's a list. I'm not going to ask you, does a mineral supply selenium compared to lipids? Well, I mean, you should know that for one, but even if you don't know, I'm not going to ask. I mean, we're going to be talking about oxygen. We're going to be talking about hydrogen a lot, especially in the beginning, carbon a lot. Okay? As you can kind of see, carbon's really associated with everything except for minerals and water. Your body utilizes these elements to make things. And we get this from our food sources. Sodium, when it comes to some of the minerals there, I mean, sodium has a lot huger effect than fluoride in the body, okay? Then molybdenum. There's even arsenic. Arsenic is generally bad, but your body needs, there are some forms of it that it can use in very, 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 very small amounts. Okay? But your body needs all of these various different elements in order to make and do all of those functions that we just saw in the previous two slides. Chapter 4, we'll talk about the digestion process. And then in chapters 5, 6, and 7, we'll talk about specific events that are occurring so I can get these different elements. Because when you look at a piece of chicken, you don't think about it in terms of it's filled with carbon and oxygen and nitrogen. And you don't think about all that nonsense, right? But your body is ultimately breaking down that huge chicken that you just ate into these basic component parts that we can easily absorb into a cell and utilize to do work inside the cells. That's ultimately the goal of the body. These are the vast majority of the ones right there. Again, kind of the big thing is knowing whether it's organic or inorganic. The easy way to remember that is, does it contain carbon? If it contains carbon, it's organic. If it doesn't contain carbon, it's inorganic. Okay? And the only things that are inorganic are minerals and water. Okay? No carbon molecule there. Okay? No carbon molecule there. Again, we utilize all these different foods that we eat to make a number of various different things within the body. Okay? There are some nutrients that you don't have to find. Okay? They're non-essential. Okay? When a nutrient is not essential, that means your body makes enough of it. And there are a handful of those. Okay, especially when it comes to proteins, different amino acids. A protein is individually amino acids just strung together. Some of them your body can make, some of them they can't. When a nutrient is essential, we have to essentially go find it, okay? Because we can't make enough of it. Some of them some nutrients are conditionally essential. What the hell does that mean? Well, you make it, but you don't necessarily make enough of it. Okay? And we'll see this sometimes in various different disease states, where a nutrient all of a sudden starts to become deficient because of the disease process, and you don't make enough of it. And these are going to be the ones that we are going to be most concerned about and most talk about, these essential nutrients. Okay. Water, even though it is inorganic, it is the most essential nutrient because we can only survive a few days without it. Okay. So inorganic doesn't mean it's needed and not needed as much. You need them. How do we determine? A lot of this stuff happened in the early 1900s when we started manufacturing a lot of, especially flour. We would mill down grain and whatnot. And when they started to do that and mass produce flour, when they milled it down, they basically got rid of all the vitamins and minerals, and they had this white powder that could be produced in mass quantities, be shipped, and it can be held on a shelf for days on end. It could be in a transport, be in a truck for several days on end. And as people were consuming this flour, a number of various different diseases started popping up. And we'll highlight some of those, especially when we get into vitamins and minerals, start looking there. But people were starting to manifest all of these various different skin lesions and whatnot. And it was because we were lacking a specific vitamin in our diet. That's when we were able to figure out what a vitamin was, for one, but ultimately what is something that is essential and something that is non-essential. Okay. When it is essential, we need to supply it in our diet. Okay, but how do I know? Because when that nutrient was lacking, a deficiency disease manifested. A number of various different signs and symptoms. These are things that can be seen. These are things that the individual can feel. These are things that can be measured. Introduce the nutrient back into the individual, and all of those signs and symptoms go away. Okay, this is what signs and symptoms are. Okay? Signs are something that are observable, something that is measured. Okay? Skin lesions. Here's an example here. Okay, bleeding gums. Okay? To test to see if vitamin C is considered essential, there you go. You avoid foods with vitamin C in it. And after a few days, you start to kind of see there'll be some various different symptoms. These are just complaints. Okay? I'm sore. Okay, how the hell do I measure that? That's just very subjective. Okay? But here you can start to see something very observable here. Okay? Gums start to bleed when you brush your teeth. Wounds are very, very, very slow to heal. Reincorporate vitamin C rich foods back into the individual's diet, and all of these signs and symptoms start to disappear. For a vast majority of nutrients, as we start to kind of get further along here, especially in unit 3, we'll start to see a lot of these deficiency disorders. Okay. And we'll talk about some of those. Okay, not every single one, but we'll talk about some of the biggies. Okay. There is also such a thing as toxicity disorders as well, okay, where if you get too much of something. And some of the, some vitamins and minerals don't have any deficiencies and don't have any toxicities. Some do. Some can be very, very severe in some of their outcomes when it comes to deficiencies or toxicities. There's, I was talking about earlier, conditionally essential. Again, usually a disease process manifests that prevents the body from producing nutrients in a certain pattern there, and then they become essential. We don't get into this too much. We can put water there as well, because it is needed in large amounts. It doesn't provide energy, so that's why it's never generally listed there with them. But water is considered a macro as well. There are a number of other things as well. There are phytochemicals, there are zoological chemicals. These are just nutrients that you don't necessarily have to go out and find per se. If you eat a varied diet, you're going to get these in your diet a lot of times, especially if you incorporate plants into your diet. If you don't incorporate plants into your diet, you definitely don't get any phytochemicals for the most part. But these are just substances. Okay, they may have a healthy benefit. Ultimately, we know a vast number of these that do have healthful benefits. Okay? But just because beta carotene or quercetin or resveratrol or tannins, these are all examples of phytochemicals. Okay, all of those things provide healthful benefits. But you can't just take quercetin or resveratrol or tannins and pull that individual substance out and take it only, because it by itself is not going to do a damn thing for you. It's the totality of what you are consuming. I don't hold up one nutrient overall. I don't, we'll go in and talk about what these all do, but it's never one individual thing. If it was one individual thing, holy smokes, that thing would be really expensive probably. And we'd probably be a little bit more healthier than what we are. But it's never one thing. It's the totality of everything. And as we start to kind of build upon stuff in this class, hopefully that will become very abundantly clear. Okay. Not all phytochemicals are fantastic. I mean, nicotine, right? Not really that helpful for you. Ricin, not really that helpful for you. Oxalic acid, it's not bad. Oxalic acid, binds to some of these vitamins and minerals and diminishes their ease of incorporation by the body. But still, I mean, spinach is still spinach. It's still good for you. Just because it may have some oxalic acid in it, that doesn't mean a damn thing. You still consume your spinach. Okay. Here's a list. Guys, I'm not going to ask you about organosulfonides and what's the biological effect. It's just here to kind of show you that there are a number of things. I mean, capsaicin has been shown to be involved with pain relief, anti-inflammatory, quercetin, anti-inflammatory. You can use a quercetin type supplementation during if you have a cold, okay, when your nose is swollen up, if you have allergies. Can also help to decrease inflammation kind of globally as well, just not rhinitis or anything like that. May help with blood pressure. There's some conflicting studies out there, but resveratrol, it's been associated with some longevity. You find it a lot in red wine. You find it in red grapes and stuff like that. Isoflavonoids, you find it in a bunch of different things. Cathinones, you find in green tea, which has a lot of interesting research behind to show some potential goodness with it. Anthocyanins, they're associated with low blood pressure. I mean, there's caffeine, when not done in excess, is pretty effective utilization for mobilizing fat. So there are a lot of fantastic things with these phytochemicals, but again, they are not. Um, they're not a cure-all. I mean, as soon as you see this word here, as soon as you see this A word here, oh my God, it's an antioxidant. Well, then people go bonkers over it. And as soon as you see this nonsense right here, we see a lot of toxicity issues now with a lot of different things that we didn't necessarily see prior to 1970 when some of these antioxidants started becoming discovered. But we'll talk about them. Some of them do have an issue when it comes to COVID and whatnot. So we'll mention and talk about some of this kind of fun stuff here as well.